Hey guys, and welcome to another tutorial. This is going to be a follow-up of the previous tutorial. It's going to be actually lighting the actual object. Now it won't be exactly the same as mine, and the reason for that is because it's very hard to actually recreate something, especially when there's a lot of settings involved. So I'm going to try follow it as closely as possible, but there will be some variants, especially because it's a completely different scene, but the general idea on how to light it is the same. So this is the actual scene. I'm just going to run through what we have, and then we'll jump into actually creating it. So over here we've got a floor plane and we've got a background plane which is composited to make a seamless background. We also have a grayscale gorilla overhead softbox and a HDRI sky. Now if you don't have these, you can use an alternative method of just using a plane and an area light. If you want to know how to create your own very standard softbox, then request it and I shall make it. I'm actually making my own to give out for free instead of having to buy the grayscale gorilla one, but that's in the future. And then after that, it's pretty much just the materials down here. If we go to function and remove unused materials, you can see all these are actually in use. A lot of them are actually for the grayscale gorilla basic objects here, which are these four, and then our only two scene materials are these two here, which of course aren't really named. So let's jump into it. I'm going to go over here to this document, and the first thing I've done is just to set up my camera angle. Now that isn't necessarily a part of the tutorial because your camera angle will be or may be completely different to mine. So set up a camera angle. I've got it so we can actually see it whooshing in, and with some nice motion blur that'd look really nice. So once you've got that, we're going to go up to this icon here and we're going to click, and we're just going to say we want to add a floor, and then we're actually going to do the same thing, click, and we're going to add a background. Now these will act basically, if we render out, this is what we get. It looks a little weird right now because we haven't got anything in the scene. If we just have it something like that and render out, you can see this is what we get. One of the first things you want to do is go into your render settings and you want to set up your aspect ratio. Now I like to have it at 1920 by 1080, which is HD. I like to lock the aspect ratio, and then I like to divide this by maybe 2. We could probably do it by one more, so 3 total. Divide you by another 2, and this, when we render it out, it's basically going to give us a very small render here, so it just renders out really fast. The bigger the actual aspect ratio, the longer it's going to take to actually render out, so keep that in mind. Of course, when you come to your final render, you will increase this, and because you've got lock ratio on, if you just change one of them, it will actually change the other one to 1080p, so it's absolutely fine. Alternatively, you can pick an actual preset from down here. I just prefer to do it manually. So we're not going to worry about anything in terms of ambient occlusion, all that kind of stuff yet. We just want to set up some lighting. We will be turning that on shortly, but let's fix the background first. So I'm going to make a new layer. You can name this if you want. I'm just going to name this BG, and I'm going to drag it onto the floor, and I'm going to drag it onto the background. Now on the floor, I'm going to click on the material, and I'm going to basically change this to frontal. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click on the floor, right click, go to Cinema 4D tags, and we're going to put on a compositing tag. Now this compositing tag, we just have to click this one thing here, which is composite background. So now if we render out, you'll see we get a seamless background. Now this is really, it really comes into its own when you add a gradient to this. So let's turn off specular. We're going to go into the color channel, click on the texture, and we're going to use a gradient, not a Fresnel. We're going to be using a gradient. Now we're going to click on the actual gradient icon to go into the actual material, and we've got a type here. We want to change this to circular. Now if you can't really see it, right click on the display here and put it to flat 2D. That'll give you a representation of what you're kind of looking at. If we actually just render this out, you'll see that it composites straight up and we get this kind of really nice look. If you didn't have the tag on and we rendered this out, you would actually get some different results, which isn't particularly what we want. So you want to make sure that is on the actual floor. Now to change these, it can be any color you want. I went for kind of a light to dark. Now you don't really want to be using white because when you add lights it's going to get really blown out. So you want to use something like a grey, and then of course to a darker grey. Again, personal preference, entirely up to you. Maybe something like that. So now if we render this out, this is what we get. So what we want to do now is come out of the camera mode because we don't want to move that. In fact, go to the camera, right click, go to Cinema 4D tags and stick on a protection tag. And that's basically going to allow us to lock this so you can't move it. Even if you are in the camera, you still can't move it. And that's one way of keeping your camera angle. So what we're going to do is go to the content browser, we're going to go to presets, and I'm going to go into the Grayscale Gorilla kit because it's a very accessible kit, it's very fast, and it just saves you doing a lot of tweaking with the lights. So we're going to use our overhead softbox, and with this, if we just go back into the objects and into the camera and render this out, this is kind of what we get as default. Nothing fantastic, it looks okay, it renders out relatively fast, so it's not too bad. Now before we actually start playing with the actual settings of this, it's a good idea to go into the actual render settings and turn on the global illumination. So if you just right click in a blank area and click on global illumination, we want to change the general GI mode to IR and QMC still, and we're going to go into the samplings and turn this down to low, and irridance cache and turn this down to low also. And once you've done that, you can actually just hit the render and you'll see it's going to do a pre-pass, and as you can see the white area here is pretty blown out. You can fix that. I decided to fix it with just lights only. So I mean, it's your personal preference. You can do it by changing some stuff in the render settings. So in terms of gamma, you can change that, the intensity, you can reduce that, and of course the diffuse depths as well, you can change that. But what we need to do now is actually create a material. So I'm going to make a new material and name this stripe, and I'm going to apply this to my null, which will apply it to everything. Now I'm going to bring out the interactive render region just so you can see here, and then we're actually going to reduce this down because the less it's got to render the better for us, and the faster it will render. So I want something maybe like that. So what we can do is turn off specular, because specular, I don't really like specular, it's fake highlights. The one you want is actually reflection. So as you can see, we've got this like really nice perfect chrome look to it. Now if you want to add a Fresnel, which what a Fresnel will do is it will, things that are facing the camera dead on won't have any reflection, but as it kind of tapers off to the edge, it will have more reflection. So if you look in the viewport here, in this little preview window, if we add a Fresnel, you'll see that because it's facing dead onto the camera, it won't have much reflection, but as it goes off to the edge, it has more reflection. Now if you want to reduce this, you just need to reduce the intensity of the brightness and mix strength to bring it down so you don't have as much. So this bottom one here, mix strength, will actually change this this texture here. So if it's 100%, it's going to have no reflection dead on. If it's down to 0, then it's going to basically act as if the texture isn't even there. So you kind of want to balance this out. Again, personal preference, creativity, knock yourself out with it basically. I'm going to add a bit of blur. Now of course adding blurs will increase the render times, but you know, it looks pretty cool. So I'm going to reduce this a little bit, maybe to 62, and yeah, that's pretty cool. So in terms of the colour, what colour do I want this? Well, in my preview I gave it a blue. In this I might give it a bit of a girly pinky red. Why? I have no idea, but I think it might look cool. Yeah, that's pretty sexy, right? You know it does. I know it does. Everyone knows it does. But that being said, what do we want to do now? Well, what I did is I actually took the luminance channel and added some luminance to this to really get it going in terms of brightness. So you can actually go in here and just add the same colour, something like this. Doesn't have to be exact because we will be toning this down, but if you want it really, really bright and to stand out with the background, luminance is perfect for that. I'm going to reduce it down to maybe 29%. It's not exact, maybe a little bit more, it's a little bit dark there. Yeah, okay, so about 53%. It's not an exact number, but it's fine. I also added some bump to this. Now you can go into the bump here and of course add in a noise, and as you can see it renders out and we get some really organic looking results. If we just increase this render, you can see we get some really cool results. Now again, you can do many things with this. You can reduce the actual global scale, which will give it more of a kind of a dotty feel, if you like. You can see it looks very cool. So let's say we're happy with that. Let's just go and do a full render of this just to see what it looks like, because it might look good just in that little area, but maybe the backside that we are rendering out looks completely weird and we don't like it. So looking at this, it looks really funky actually. So yeah, that looks pretty cool. And what we're going to do now is to kind of finish it off. Now I had some problems with this, so we'll see if we can avoid them in this. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to the content browser and we're going to add in a HDRI sky. Now this isn't necessary. I'm going to reduce the actual quality here, because one of the problems with the interactive render is if you have the quality up high, it's going to render that out, and every change you make, everything you add, it's going to update it, so it can actually slow your scene down a bit. So it might be advisable to turn it off when you're actually adding new things. As you probably saw, we had a little bit of a lag spike. But I'm going to go into this setting here, and I'm going to go into my HDRIs, and I'm going to use maybe number 2, which is my favorite. And if we render out this little section now, we're going to get some different results, and that is because the actual HDRI is affecting this scene. So if we kind of like this result, then by all means continue. I don't particularly like the results that I'm getting, so I may reduce the actual reflectiveness, and I may reduce the Fresnel as well. And actually I think reducing it might improve it. I might actually bring it up instead. And again, you can play with these to match what you're kind of going for. I kind of like that. It looks pretty cool. I might just reduce that down. And yeah, the reflections aren't as in your face right now, which is pretty cool. So just kind of getting a balancing act here. Okay, I think that looks pretty cool. With a bump, we can actually reduce the bump as well if we wish. Maybe want something a little bit more subtle, like that. Looks pretty cool. And then what do we want to do? That's pretty much it, really. I mean, there's nothing to it per se. You can just mess around with it and kind of do a quick render to see if this is what you are looking for. As you can see, maybe the bump isn't particularly what we want, so maybe we can actually just reduce the bump maybe to 1%. So it's very subtle, and maybe that will show up in the renderer, maybe it won't. Maybe we'll have to go like 0.1, and I think that actually worked. Yeah, that looks pretty good. That's a lot better. I kind of want this a little bit brighter though, so I'm just going to increase the illumination a little bit more. And the good thing about rendering to picture viewer is you can actually just toggle through these with the arrows up and down. You can kind of see, well, the brighter one looks actually a lot better. The background could basically be used to brighten things up a little bit. So we can jump back into the background, into the color channel, and we can go into here and just maybe increase the color here, something a little bit lighter, and here maybe a little bit lighter as well, and then just do another quick render. And that's pretty much what you do. You're just going to go in, you're going to tweak things to see what looks good, what doesn't look good, what could be improved and stuff like that. So one of the things that you might want to do is in the overhead softbox, I don't think it's on by default, but yeah, shadows actually are on by default. So you might want to increase the shadow quality, just kind of play around with it. We might want to look at a different angle, trying to find where it goes close to the floor, maybe something like that. So let's do a quick render of this, and yeah, I can kind of see that it doesn't go close enough to the actual floor. in order for it to give us any shadows. You could turn on ambient occlusion to kind of fill them in, but I don't think it's actually necessary, and it's just going to increase your render time. So looking at the white background, again, it looks a little bit too bright, so I'm going to go into here, and I'm just going to reduce this down a little bit. And we can also reduce the actual intensity or brightness of this down just slightly, and then do another render, and we can just kind of compare these and get the balance correct. So out of these two, you can see the background does go down a little bit, which does help a lot, and you can see a very faint shadow down here. Again, this is a very small render, but what you want to do now is, what we could do in fact is go into the renderer, and we want to basically output this. We want to output all frames up to how many frames that you want. I'm just doing 90, and what I will do is I will render this out, and it's going to say the file name specified blah blah blah, just hit yes, and this is going to render out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here, and then I'll be back once it's rendered out, and hopefully it won't take as long. So be back soon. Okay guys, we are back and it's rendered out. It took only 8 minutes and 23 seconds, which isn't too bad. You could probably multiply that about maybe 3 or 4. So you are looking, you know, within the hours, but that isn't bad comparing my render, which was with full animation, which took 7 hours. Ridiculous amount of time. But just looking at this, you can see each frame is around 4 to 3 seconds per frame. At this size, the maximum was probably the 13th frame here, 13 seconds to render out that, and that was kind of the pinnacle of this. It's got the max glossiness in the frame, so you've got all these glossiness that need to be rendered out, and you can see here we don't have as much, but because the actual entire frame is pretty much filled up of these stripes, that's why it took the longest. And as you can see, as they went past, it gradually got lower and lower and lower and lower and then lower. Back to the 3 seconds, which is the average frame for here. Now, of course, you can get away with some of this, like this section here, these frames. You could probably save your time in these frames. So let's say, it's actually quite a lot. So from here, technically, you could actually get rid of frame 68 to frame 90, and the reason for that is because it's the exact same frame. So what you would do is you would actually just copy this frame in post-production, and then you would duplicate it outwards in order to recreate this, instead of having the time here actually rendered out, because this, you know, equals up to at least a minute with all these frames, or close to a minute. So you can see you could actually save a minute in rendering, which might not seem a lot, but when this actually renders out in full HD, you are looking at maybe 20 to 2 minutes per frame, especially on just these blank frames, not flames. And pretty much, you know, that does in the long run add up. So you could use some cheats like that, but let me just play this out for you. As you can see, it looks really nice. There's not much to say. You could add some motion blur. You could do that in post-production again to save a lot of time. You could add your color correction in post-production. Don't forget, this is just a raw render. This is just the thing that you pump out of Cinema 4D. Take it into something like After Effects to add in some levels and some color correction and some cool effects. You could make this look really nice. But that is pretty much it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching, and thank you to the person who requested to see it, because without requests, I'm pretty much, you know, I don't really know what to create. I'm not sure what you guys are actually interested in creating or seeing, you know, any type of tutorial. So if you do have any suggestions, then please leave a comment about it, and you can leave on any video. I always check all the comments, and I always reply to the comments that I get. I also reply to personal messages as well, so if you do want to send a personal message in terms of a tutorial request, feel free to do so. And that is pretty much it. So thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and make sure you hit that thumbs up button, and of course subscribe. I will catch you next time. Peace.